Hello, everyone. Welcome to Toy Guys Talking. It's been a while, and very pleased to have a member of the Patreon tribe with me today. It is Dangerous Dominic Graham, one of the other long-lost plastic golden Graham brothers. They say in wrestling when someone isn't really a brother, they call it plastic brothers. So I got a lot of good brothers out there, a lot of good golden Graham brothers. And we're going to talk a little bit today about toys, obviously, but also about Film and Page. And you've got a YouTube channel. I want to give you a plug right away. Your YouTube channel is Film and Page. It used to be called Panels and Borders, right?
Yeah, it used to be called Panels and Borders. And because my channel originally, I was going to focus on comic books. And so like the panels in comics and the borders, and then it kind of shifted to something else. And I thought, well, this doesn't really match. And then if you search panels and borders if you Google it, then it comes up all these siding companies. So I decided to change it to something that fits a little bit more, because I usually talk about like TV, movies, and books and comics. So Film Page on my channel.
And I wanted to talk to you a little bit when I asked you if you wanted to do this chat, any ideas. And one of your ideas was how to recapture the passion of a hobby, if you're not passionate about it. And I said, I don't think that would be a long chat from my perspective, because if you're not passionate about it, it's time to walk on and let it go. And maybe you'll come back around to it. I find that even with some stuff I have, something can really be impressive and I can enjoy it. And then after a while, the shine wears off. Maybe even put it in storage, come back to it a year or 2 or 5 years later. It's like, man, I'm glad I didn't sell that, because this is cool.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about what I really wanted to talk to you about, because a lot of your videos deal with books, movies based on books. And I want to talk about, well, a number of different things, but one of them is, what are some of the best movie adaptations? Because we've always heard, right, the book was better. I mean, since the dawn of time, the book was better, but that's not necessarily always, it's not a question of which one is better and worse. Like sometimes they can complement each other. Sometimes both of them together create the full experience. But just to kick it off, like off the top of your head, and I have a guess of what you're going to say, but what do you think is one of the best book adaptations turned into a movie?
Best book adaptation turned into a movie so far right now, it's the newest Dune film.
I knew you were going to say
Denis
that.
Villeneuve.
How brutal is it that we have to wait this long for part 2?
Yes, and it's got pushed back till March now. It was originally supposed to come out in November. Now it's pushed back till March.
But that guy is an absolute genius. Like sometimes us older folk, I don't know if you're as old as me, but it used to be better. It used to be better. And the guys who were doing it back when I was a kid were better. But Villeneuve is right up there with Ridley Scott, Kubrick. I mean, I've never really been all that impressed by Kubrick, like visually and technically speaking. Yeah, he's on a different level, but I guess soul, spirit, I never really got much of that out of Kubrick. But Villeneuve, his stuff is moving. Like after I watch a Villeneuve movie, I feel like I read a book. Blade Runner 2049, Dune Part 1. He really knows how to draw you into a different world and immerse you into it.
Well, that's actually Blade Runner 2049 is a good example, because that was the first time I was really saw one of his films. And I remember hearing about that movie. They were going to do a sequel to Blade Runner. And my first reaction was eyes just rolled, like, oh God.
Did you ever read part 2, the book Blade Runner 2?
I've read the original novel that Blade Runner is based on, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, by
Philip K. Dick.
I've read that.
Yeah, one of the all-time greats. But did you know about the book Blade Runner 2?
No, that I didn't know about.
Yeah, so that came out, I mean, to me, it feels like a couple of years ago. It's probably 20, 25 years ago. But there was a book, Blade Runner 2, and I've got it somewhere. I never made it all the way through, because it's not exactly a page turner, just like, the movie. But it was interesting. But 2049, I felt like after I saw that one, like, oh, okay, now we've got a complete great movie. You put Blade Runner and
Yes.
Blade Runner 2049 together, and this has always been the missing piece that we didn't know was
Hmm.
missing.
Yeah, and when I first heard about that film, I was really skeptical it was going to be any good, and I even went by myself to the theater to watch it. And when I saw it, I was like blown away. I thought no one could make a sequel to this, and he totally landed it. Then when I heard he was doing Dune, then I knew it was in good hands.
Yeah, with the first Blade Runner, and I want to talk about Dune in a minute, but with the first Blade Runner, I've always wanted to love it because it's just so visually stunning, like Kubrick.
Hmm.
It just, especially like how did this guy do this with the tools he had to work with at the time? It's just
Yeah.
impossible, but somehow he envisioned it and he manifested it. But the thing with Blade Runner, every time I finished it, no matter what version, because there's what, like four or
Yeah, there's
five
a lot of
different
different
versions of
versions.
it, and I kept trying. Like I kept trying so hard to love Blade Runner because it was like this is a movie I should love.
Hmm.
Um, I always just walked away from it feeling like visually it was incredible, but it's just missing soul. It's missing heart and soul.
Yeah.
And the thing I really love about 2049 is that's the heart and soul. It hadn't
Yeah.
come along yet. Like the reason the first movie feels the way it does, kind of empty to me, is because no, you got to wait till the second act. That's what 2049 is. It's the
Hmm.
second act, and that's where the heart and soul comes in. And that's why I really never want to watch the first one by itself ever again. Like if I'm watching Blade Runner, like put 4 or 5 hours aside or whatever it's going to take,
Yeah.
because they have to go together.
Yeah, but you have a point. Like when I watch Blade Runner, it is more or less for the visuals, the music
Oh, the music,
is
Kindred.
great, and but
Or
the other thing I really like about that movie is not Harrison Ford. It's actually Rutger Hauer.
yeah,
He
man,
plays such an amazing villain in that movie.
yeah, Tears in the Rain,
Yeah.
and it's such a like different thing at the time. It's really a trailblazing movie to
Hmm.
end a movie like that. I mean, it bombed at the time because people were like, "What?"
Yeah.
And I'm sure the few people who went to see it, the word of mouth didn't do it any favors. Like, so how does it end? Well, it's depressing. The good guy
Yeah.
Han Solo gets his butt kicked.
Yeah. It is an acquired taste, that film, for sure.
Yeah, but Dune. So Dune's they've taken a few cracks at it. The original
Yeah.
movie, which again I want to love it, but
Well, the original '84 film, that was my gateway drug into Dune.
yeah, it's a good
Uh,
intro. It's a good
yeah.
foot in the door. But then compared to the book, so
Yeah.
let's kick it off. Like before we get to Villeneuve's version, that's what I really want to talk to you about the book and the original '80s movie. What's good? What's horrendous?
Well, like I like the '80s movie because it's got some pretty good visuals. Now, some of the special effects I don't think are that great even for the day, if you
Hmm.
compare it to like Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back. But the biggest thing I think with that film is, well, it's too short. It's Dune should have been two movies.
Yeah,
Originally, that was the plan when they were making that movie, but they decided to squeeze it all into one. And the ending of the film completely guts the
yeah.
whole message that the book was trying to convey. Where Paul Atreides at the end of that movie literally becomes a literal messiah, literal savior, literal god. Where in the book, the whole point of the book is what is that people shouldn't, give their power up to charismatic leaders,
Hmm.
and the Fremen end up doing that with Paul Atreides, and they pay a really heavy price in the later on books for
So
doing that.
I've read most of the Dune book. I was really enjoying it, and the thing I really like to do is book and movie. So
Hmm.
the movie provides things that the book doesn't, like what people actually look like. And my attitude has always been take it or leave it. Like if I see something in a movie that's adapting a book I love and I don't like it, I'm not all or nothing about it. I'm not like I'm done with this movie. I hate it because they miscast co-star number 7.
Hmm.
But I really appreciated the Villeneuve movie for letting me, you know, see a face and hear voices for these characters that otherwise, how do you do it? Um,
Hmm.
when I was reading the book, I thought, man, this seems so much like the Bible. Like it reads just like the Bible, and having basically that message in the book be, um, careful with cults of personality. Like that's again taken right from the Bible, where the warning is Jesus Christ will return.
Hmm.
Careful, there's going to be someone who's claiming to be him, and everybody or a lot of people are going to buy it hook, line, and sinker. You got to
Yeah.
discern, you got to be calm, you got to be patient, you have to feel. And that's the thing, like when it comes to the Bible and also with Dune, all of the facts and checklists and all that stuff, being very analytical isn't going to help you. You need to just kind of sit back and feel a person out and
Hmm.
find out who's being genuine and who's not being genuine. But would you say that's one of the worst ever changes from book to movie?
For the 84 film, yes, it's, I wouldn't say it's the worst, but I guess, see, it's hard for me to kind of,
Yeah, I get it.
because I do love that film. I do love the 84 film, because when I saw it, I didn't know it was a book or anything. I saw it and I just thought it was a cool sci-fi movie. And I didn't find out till I was in my, I think, early teens that it was a book. But now that I can compare the two, I can see why a lot of people a lot of Dune fans dislike it. And now there's an alternate edit where it has like a
Yes,
proper ending, fan
seen that
edit,
one. Yeah,
but that doesn't really count, right? It's the theatrical release that counts. That's what everyone remembers, and that's where that's where it really, like, that last ending just demolishes the whole meaning of the story.
yeah. I mean, sometimes they have to make a change
Hmm.
from book to movie, and I think it would really help people, not just for books, not just for movies, not just for anything. I think it would help people to walk a mile in the shoes of the people creating this stuff. And that's not to
Hmm.
say you have to go into a 25 career of writing books or a 15-year career of making movies. Just a couple will do you. So I've done a couple of little short films, independent films, student films. I've written a book. Um, I've never put it out there. I probably never will, but it's something I worked on every single
Hmm.
day for a year, and just to be able to say, there, I did it. So I find when I'm talking to fans who do a lot of kvetching about why they do this and why do they do that, more often than not, I don't really have their frustration, because I'm like, look, I
Hmm.
don't like it either, but I'm not angry about it because I get it. Because
Yeah.
I've, not to say that I've done it too, but I've dabbled. I dipped
Hmm.
my toe in the water, and that was really just enough. Dipping the toe in the waters of what these creative people do and what they have to deal with is sometimes just enough to let you not be angry about it, just be disappointed. And I'm like, if you have the choice between being angry and disappointed or just disappointed, which one would you pick?
Yeah, just disappointed.
Yeah, I would pick just disappointed. So I get sometimes when they have to make a change from book to movie because they're different mediums.
Hmm.
And, it's, we decided to focus on this or accentuate this or blah, blah, blah. But when you change the whole meaning of a book, I'm trying to understand why. What motivated that? Did they think it would sell more tickets?
Maybe they, I don't know. I find like Hollywood has like a very narrow view of what they think an ending should be. Like, it's not
Especially
too
for that
often
time.
for that time. Yeah. And now I've read lots about the production of that movie. And I know that David Lynch
Oh
didn't
yeah.
have Final Cut. They took it away from him and they did
Yeah.
the editing. And there's supposedly, well, there was a lot more footage. There's an edition of it out there that was put together by someone that goes by the name of Spice Driver or Spice Diver. And that, if you watch that version, it's much longer and it has the proper ending. And
Hmm.
so it's much closer to the book than what the theatrical release was. And so, and he refuses to talk about that film till this day. Like he's because he says it's just so painful. He said, he said he would never, after that happened to him, he never gave anything to the studios again. He would never, because he felt like he kind of sold out, I guess, by giving them final cut on that film.
That just reminds me, Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart. And I hear that over and over again about Hollywood. It's just again, just saying this as someone who dabbled a little bit. I was on a couple of sets. I was on a couple of kind of mid-sized sets with productions that had, decent budgets and stuff. It's a messed up business machine. Like you have these really creative, passionate people, and you plug them into this corporate machine, and it's just so screwed up. Like, the suits are making money off of the t-shirt wearers, like, and they're
Yeah.
trying to wring and squeeze every drop of passion and love, the stuff that they're not capable of conveying. Like, if the suits could do it, they would do it all night and day, but they can't do it. And so they hire people to do it. Hey, you go and you do this. And so they get guys like, speaking in that day and age, the George Lucases, the Steven Spielbergs, the Robert Zemeckis's, and they start squeezing and, give us that love, give us all that warm, fuzzy stuff that we're not capable of doing. And it's very important to always, if you're a creative person, to guard your heart, because they will destroy it, and you'll end up damaged, like guys like David Lynch, who all these years later, he's like, I don't have time for that. And he could be sharing, I'm sure it wasn't 100% horrible experience. He could be sharing some good memories and good experiences with good people on the set. No movie production is 100% bad with 100% horrible people. He's guarding his heart, and I can't fault him for that.
Yeah, and going back to George Lucas, the thing I find, it seems now like the suits now kind of seem to think they are creative, but at least if you watch those execs talk, like, I believe his name was, I might be getting him mixed up with his father, because I know his father was an actor, but I think it's Alan Ladd that convinced 20th Century Fox to go ahead with Star Wars. So he admitted, like, I don't get this at all, but I think he knows what he's doing, and he let it go.
Yeah,
at least he had enough wisdom to know to trust George Lucas.
Yeah, and he seems like one of the good dudes. Not to say all the suits are bad, that's definitely not my intention. But he seems like one of the good guys who's like, yeah, I don't get it, but faith. Ladd was a guy with an immense amount of faith. Some of those guys, the bean counters, the decision makers, the check writers, they just got no faith. They want the profit, and as soon as something threatens the profit, there's no faith. And I appreciate guys like Ladd who are like, no, we're going to stick by this guy. We're going to ride or die. And Star Wars is one of the great success stories throughout history, and so much so that George Lucas got to call his own shots. And he's a fascinating study in himself, because he went from being fighting against the system to kind of the Harvey Dent line, right? You either die a hero or you live long enough to yada yada yada. I love Uncle George, always will, but it's fascinating to see. And the thing about George Lucas, I don't know him. I've only talked to him a few times on Armchair Directors. He's always not very pleased to be getting a call from me and Crandall, but I kind of get the feeling that he's self-aware. He's been self-aware about it. He's like, oh, I'm going down a dark path here. Oh, well, he just seems like he's the kind of guy who would be like, oh, I'm doing what I used to hate, but whatever. I got mouths to feed. So,
Yeah. You could really notice that difference between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy and stuff like that.
With Dune, there was a show then before Villeneuve took a crack at it. And what'd you think of the miniseries?
So there was a miniseries that came out in 2000, and that wasn't, it had very small budget, but it's actually not bad. And as far as faithful to the book the 2000 miniseries is probably the most faithful adaptation to the actual book than even Villeneuve's. Even now, Denis Villeneuve is very close, but I thought that miniseries, that despite all of its drawbacks, like there was a lot of things visually I didn't like about it. I didn't like a lot of the costume designs and things like that, but I thought it was, as far as like nailing down the story, I thought it was pretty close.
Dune
And then
miniseries. And you got it. Like when you've got no budget, you really have to say, well, what can be our biggest pro here, since it's not going to be recognizable actors, and you don't need a recognizable actor. Some of the best actors on the planet have never been in anything yet. They've never been given a shot. But that's just the way the business works. I went to a seminar one time about how to make a successful movie, and a big shot producer came down to speak at the university. Big shot producer. And you know what he told us? You got to get an actor who's hot. That's what he kept saying. You got to get a guy who's hot. And he said something like, Javier Bardem. You want to make a big hit indie movie? Get Javier Bardem. But why? What if he's not right for the role? Right for the role? What are you talking about? You'll never make it. I'm like, that's right. I never will, and I never did, and I never want to. But that's how it is. So when you don't have the big stars, when you don't have the big budget, all you really have going for you. Well, they had William Hurt, actually. He was pretty.
Yeah, he was the biggest one they had in there. Yeah.
But you've got to basically say, look, we've got to do something for the Dune fans and for word of mouth. We've got to stick closer to the book than the movie did, the first movie.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that miniseries is they actually did another miniseries, a sequel to that, where they adapted the two other books, the sequel to Dune, Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. And they kind of took the two books and combined them into one and made one miniseries out of them, Children of Dune. And that was really good. And it's the only screen adaptation that you have of Dune Messiah and Children of Dune out there, is that one.
Cool. And then there was Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 1. We're patiently waiting for Part 2, and man, has the momentum just been destroyed thanks to the big outbreak. But the first one was a masterpiece, and I don't usually say that about a half a movie. You know, when I walk out of a movie that is not complete, especially if I didn't know that was what was going to happen, I'm like, come on, I should get my next ticket for free or 50% off the next ticket or something like that. But in terms of incomplete movies go, this one was fantastic. Now, what do you think about this one that wasn't as accurate to the book as the miniseries was?
Well, there are certain. Well, there's some characters, I guess, have what you would call some problematic elements that they kind of step back on when it comes to the new movie, which is understandable. When the miniseries, they didn't at all. They just went right into it. And the other thing is one thing that I guess I can understand it because maybe it's more cinematic, but one thing that I found kind of puzzling is the death of Liet Kynes in the Villeneuve film, as opposed to the book. Because when you read that chapter where Liet Kynes dies, he's on top of spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the book, but
yeah,
he's that whole chapter of his death really nails home what the book is about. And by, I guess, taking that out, I think that's a very important chapter. I found it kind of odd that they changed it. Liet's death in the movie. Now in the movie, it's I'm not sure. I think it may be because it's more heroic in the way they portrayed it in the film than how it's portrayed in the book. It kind of gives Liet more of a heroic death.
What do you? I don't know why this morning show thing keeps popping up here. It has nothing to do with Dune. Do you think it's something that Villeneuve, and this is just speculation here, he clearly loves the book. He clearly has a lot of respect and admiration for the book. And that doesn't seem like a decision the studio would force on him. Like, how do you think he approaches changing basically the sacred text of Dune?
Yeah, I don't know. Now maybe I don't know what his thinking was. Maybe in his mind it was justified, but um, I'm thinking maybe it's because it shortens it. That's a bit long of a death
Yeah,
scene,
yeah,
maybe the way it is in the book, because it's a prolonged death scene. There's a whole chapter where Liet's like hallucinating and talking to his father, and then he comes to the realization what he did by bringing Paul in with the friend, and then he dies, and so you don't get any of that in the movie. So maybe it's just a time thing.
yeah. That's often what it is when things are changed. It's for the movie. It's usually the sake of time. Books just have the luxury of no budget, no set restraints, no effect restraints. They can and they can really stretch things out, get into it,
Hmm.
explain why things are happening, characters' motivations. Not a lot of movies are able to get in the head of a character as well as a book can.
Yeah, but as far as that go, I was very very happy with it, and visually I thought it was amazing.
And it really got the tone
Yeah.
uh, really well. I mean, the that's a thing that sometimes gets lost from book to movie. Like, despite not having any music or lighting or
Hmm.
any visuals whatsoever other than the cover, a book you would think wouldn't have tone, but it absolutely does. A creator can create an atmosphere and a tone.
Yeah.
And then when you watch the movie, like if the director or whoever, maybe the producer is the overarching creative force, but if they just didn't get it and they have a different vision, and it's like it's too bright or it's too dark or whatever, like you're not getting the whole atmosphere and essence of the book,
Hmm.
then how good is it going to be?
Yeah, but he seems to really get it, and like I cannot wait for part two. And that was my biggest fear when this movie was being made, because they didn't film these back to back like Lord of the Rings. They
Yeah.
wanted to film one and see how it did in theaters. So I was like thinking, well, this bombs, then we're stuck with half of a movie.
I'm actually glad that they went that way because most of the time when I hear of them doing that, doing two at the same time, um, it's efficient. They're saving more money. They're being frugal, but I think the energy is affected by it. I think there's like fatigue from the performers and the crew. Like right
Hmm.
away, what comes to mind is Back to the Future 2 and 3 because I think they filmed those back to back, right?
Yeah, I believe they did. Yeah.
Yeah, so 2 was fun for what it was, and then 3 is fun for what it is, but it's
Hmm.
just like it the Hobbit movies are a really good one. Now the Lord of the Rings movies are fantastic, and we could talk a long time about the Lord of the Rings movies too.
Hmm.
But those were great, and then the Hobbit felt, well, it had all different issues entirely, but the Hobbit to
Yeah.
me felt like a responsible, fiscally responsible production, whereas the Lord of the Rings movies just felt like a war, and they
Yeah.
documented a war with these actors who went through
Yeah.
hell.
Yeah, and as far as book adaptations go, I did not care for The Hobbit at all.
Yeah,
I don't know why it had to be like three movies when
it,
the book is
it didn't.
small. Like the book is not even 300 pages. Like that could have been one movie easy.
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, we all said it when that was happening, when they said it was going to be two movies, and everyone rejoiced, like, yes, because it can't be one. And then they said, guess what? It's going to be three movies. Like, what? It was the first time I ever remember going, no, don't give me more. Less is
Yeah,
more. And I seem to be saying that more and more ever since that happened.
I really enjoyed The Hobbit, the book, and I found it very strange that when I heard it, and I haven't watched all three of the Hobbit movies. I think I've watched the first one, and I just couldn't go any further than that.
Yeah, it's padded and it's just there to make another movie and sell more tickets and sell more Blu-rays.
Hmm.
Um, I never actually even made it through the entire original Hobbit trilogy. I just couldn't get through the third movie. I was like, oh my god, this is just so bloated. And luckily, there's great fan edits out there. My go-to is Dustin Lee's Hobbit cut, where
Hmm.
he made it into one 4 hour movie, and it just feels more like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies.
Yeah. Yeah, which those movies were fantastic, and it made sense because you have three books, so you can make each book into a movie. So it makes sense to have three movies. Where the
What's
Hobbit's like
so? What would you say is one of the worst book adaptations you've ever seen?
one of the worst book
Like for a
adaptations
good book, like for a book that
for a
you
good
thought, wow,
book.
that's a fantastic book, and then the movie was like, did you even read the book? Type of adaptation.
um, I that's a good question. You know what? It this is something. It's a book we've both read and we've both seen the movie, and I'm not sure how you feel about the movie, but I watched the movie last weekend just in preparation for this because I hadn't seen the movie. And I wasn't really too keen on the movie. I don't think the movie captured the spirit of the book all that well. And that's The Way of the Peaceful Warrior.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Bring
I
that up
found
here.
it because my girlfriend kind of watched it with me and she just, well, she didn't watch it, but she was kind of in and out, but she really despised Dan Millman. And he does come off really unlikable in the film.
Yeah,
And I
he's a
kind of
punk.
get that's the point. But, and the other
Well,
thing,
at the beginning, he's a punk.
yeah,
He, you know, it's a journey from punk to
yeah.
um,
And
good guy.
and then the um, and then the other thing was for me, I just didn't it just didn't fit in my mind at all was the casting of Nick Nolte as Socrates.
Really?
Like that, I didn't have that when I read the book. Like Socrates was nothing like that in my mind.
So
Because
you
and
read the
then
book first, and so
yes,
you've got that, not necessarily baggage or your own idea of it, but uh, I totally get that. Like Nick Nolte is completely out in left field. Like
hmm
really, that's the guy. But I watched the movie first and then read the book, so I didn't have that jarring. But I totally get that. Reading the book, like that guy in the book, Socrates, does not speak like Nick Nolte.
no,
But I can't help, when I read the book, I couldn't help but read Socrates' lines as Nick Nolte. I just thought like the strained voice, not so much like Nick Nolte, because Socrates is nothing like Nick Nolte the man, but the strained voice I thought was a good call because it really, like, even if it wasn't Nick Nolte, whoever performed Socrates' role, I thought that was a good call because it's a guy who's been through the mill.
hmm
He's been through the meat grinder and chooses happiness. And a lot of people, they go, you can't choose happiness. Happiness is a condition based on what you have and getting what you want. And no, the whole point of the book is it doesn't matter what you've been through, you can choose happiness. And like necessary required reading, if you like anything about Peaceful Warrior, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, is the Socrates prequel. And I'm not usually a big fan of prequel books. There he is, old sock. Um, but the Journey of Socrates. Um, so I wondered about the meat grinder he had been through, and oh man, I don't even want to talk about it. It's horrific. And
I've now have you
I'm
read
talking,
that? Have you read that? The Journey of
yeah, it's
Socrates, the prequel.
horrific. And like when I say horrific, it's not necessarily horrible things that happen to him, but if you want to really destroy a man, you go after his family.
Hmm.
And I'll say no more for people who haven't read the book and who just don't even
Yeah.
want to linger on that. But so when I say you can choose happiness, this is a story of a man in the book who lost everything, and not just lost it,
Hmm.
but had to
Yeah, lost in a
had
very horrific way.
horrific, torturous way everything he held dear in the world, and went, I choose happiness. So some people would say that's insanity. Oh well, Some people would also say being miserable because you didn't get what you wanted is insanity. So everyone's
Hmm.
got their own opinion.
Yeah. And actually, going back to that Journeys of Socrates. Now, I didn't read the book, but I was commuting out of town for a while, and so I had these long drives. I listened to the audiobook,
Oh
and
no.
it is very, very good. The guy who reads it has like an absolutely
Oh,
epic voice.
sorry, the audiobook for Journey of Socrates?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I haven't listened to that one. I listened to the audiobook after I'd read the book and watched the movie, the Dan Millman Way of the Peaceful Warrior audiobook. So I just
Hmm.
assumed he narrated all of his audiobooks, which I hope he doesn't, because great writer, but he's not a
Yeah.
performer, and an
No.
audiobook reader is a performer.
Yeah, where the guy who does the audiobook for the Journeys of Socrates, it's fantastic. Like if you get a chance to listen
Oh
to
yeah.
it, oh, listen to it. Listen, it's
Uh,
awesome.
Based on your recommendation, I'll have to check that out for sure. So that's one of the worst
Yeah, I
books
wasn't a big fan of that one because I love
books
I love that book, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior.
and I got to bring up Revenge of the Sith. Have you ever read the book for Revenge of the Sith?
No, but I watched your review of the book for
Yeah,
Revenge of the Sith,
yeah.
and
Some
you said
people
it's
who have been following me for some time now are probably sick and tired of listening to me go on and on about Revenge of the Sith. But this book is extra special to me because I really fell in love with Star Wars, the original trilogy, and it feels like it fueled a lot of my creativity through my teen years and my 20s,
hmm
because I was like I held the original trilogy as the gold standard. It was the measuring stick. Something
yeah.
is good and successful and inspiring and fun, not necessarily by copying Star Wars, but conjuring those feelings. Don't cross lines Star Wars didn't cross, that
hmm
type of thing. Try to aspire to accomplish things that Star Wars accomplished. So then when the prequels came out, I was like, oh my God, what is this? This is so not measuring up to the originals. And I chalked up the first two prequels as, well, okay, whatever. They're not for me. That's fine. I don't have to
hmm
try to destroy them because they're not for me. I mean, they're for people who really love them. So go to it. And then the Revenge of the Sith came out, hoping like at least this one, hopefully, will capture the third one, the original trilogy, and it didn't. And then I read this book, and it's so amazing because it doesn't feel like it's based on the movie. It feels like George Lucas gave him the author a rough outline and said, "Oh, you fill in the blanks." So it's totally different dialogue, which thank God, you know, thank God. The dialogue is better, and it's a deeper movie. Revenge of the Sith was an action movie.
hmm
The book is not an action movie. The book is a psychological drama. It just gets into the heads of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, and it's so well written that it's heartbreaking. And I didn't think the movie was, but the book actually really and I don't even, or I don't even hear Hayden Christensen's voice when I'm reading the book. I hear just Anakin as he should have been, and that's not
yeah.
necessarily Matt Lanter or any other actor, Sebastian Shaw, but I just hear Anakin as he should have been. Um, there's scenes are different. They're just deeper. They're heavier, and I
hmm
appreciate Revenge of the Sith for providing a couple of visuals for how things look, but for the most part, like I just love the pace, the depth of the Revenge of the Sith book, and I love that it exists. That George Lucas read it. He probably didn't even read it, but he was like, "Yeah, that's cool. That's fine. You made something 1,000 times better than my try at it."
hmm
I just love that he was cool with putting it out.
Yeah, that's interesting because I watched that when you did the review of that book. I watched that video and I was thinking, yeah, that's interesting. Now, have you softened on the prequels at all over the years, or your opinion still firm?
The only way I feel like I've changed on the prequels is that I saw two of the sequels and I went, okay, the prequels aren't so bad anymore. So
Yeah.
they've moved up just by way of being better than and I never did see was it Rise of Skywalker?
Hmm.
I never saw it when it came out, and I had Disney Plus, and it was on Disney Plus, so it was a Saturday afternoon. My wife was out shopping, and I was like, you know what, I'll I'll watch this, and I put it on, and I turned it off in like 15 minutes. I was like, no, somehow Palpatine returned. You know
Yeah.
what? If you don't care, I don't care. That's one of
Yeah.
my it's one of my
Yeah.
things when I go into a movie. If you don't care, I don't care. Somehow Palpatine returned.
And that was the first. Well, I'm not sure which one came out first. Was it Solo or Rise of Skywalker?
Oh, I don't
Because
know.
that was because neither one of them. Because after the Last Jedi, that was the last Star Wars movie I saw in the theaters. I didn't
Rise of
bother.
Rise of Skywalker was 2019. Solo, a Star Wars story, was 2018. So
Okay,
Solo
so a
came
year
out
before.
first, which was like a whole other issue. Like they were just cranking these things out
Hmm.
way too fast. There's fatigue. Like, can you imagine if when the original trilogy was coming out, if they snuck out a prequel movie in between Empire and Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, well, and that, well, that was one thing I always thought was kind of clever about Lucas is he kind of let the anticipation build up because after Return of the Jedi had its run. Now I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I was always hearing rumors of prequels coming out, even
I,
back in the
I,
80s. Like, oh, it's
I
going to
didn't
happen. You never?
I didn't watch Star Wars in the 80s as a kid.
Oh, when? Oh, really?
My first I knew of it. I mean, it was too
Yeah.
big for anyone to not know of it. And plus I watched
Mhm.
Droids and Ewoks, so I was kind of in the outer rim. I was living
Oh,
on
okay.
Tatooine, like staring up at the bright trilogy out there. But I was like, when I was really young, I didn't want to have anything to do with it because it was gross and creepy. Like,
Hmm.
I'm talking about Jabba and even Vader. I remember on TV seeing they played Return of the Jedi on TV a few years after it came out, and the helmet coming off, and of course, like never having seen Star Wars, I was just curious, like what's under the mask, and he was so disgusting, like it's Luke's father and he's emotional and it's supposed to be like a big happy moment and he's disgusting under the mask. And just as a little kid, a really little kid, I was like, gross. I was expecting like white flowing hair and, a white beard, basically Santa under there, like, the conquering hero. And then when I was a teen and I watched them, it was fine. Of course he's butchered and maimed and it's a redemptive story. Like he's been redeemed and the redemption was more important than any of the visuals and the acting, the performance. I could appreciate it more as a teen than as a little kid.
Yeah.
Sebastian Shaw in his few seconds on screen is fantastic. Just as the father who loves his son.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I saw them like as far back as like I had an older brother and he was into it, so he's always renting them. So there's like no way I wasn't going to see them.
Yeah.
So, but even when I was a kid, um, I remember hearing rumors and stories that they were going to do these prequels, and but there was so much anticipation built up by the time the Phantom Menace came out.
Yeah. It was kind of like what you went into Way of the Peaceful Warrior with, like
Yeah.
everyone, and I had that too. Even though I didn't grow up on Star Wars in the '90s, I had my idea, and even just a few years, like less than a decade, of what I thought the prequels were going to be like. It didn't take 20 years. All it took was a few years and watching Phantom Menace, and I just went, "Whoa, this who is Qui-Gon Jinn?" That was
Hmm.
one of the real disappointments to me when I saw the Phantom Menace. Um, they made the star of the movie um, new character
Yeah.
who had never been
Yeah. New.
mentioned in anything before. And like the beauty of Star Wars was during the opening crawl, did they mention if they didn't mention the Clone Wars in one of the crawls, it was definitely like Obi-Wan mentioning it to Luke.
Yeah.
You fought in the Clone Wars. Just that little mention. Lucas was the master of turning a little mention into a movie.
Hmm.
A guy in the back of the cantina getting a figure, he could really take molehills and turn them into mountains.
Yeah.
And so my big problem with I got a bunch of problems with this movie. Yeah, Anakin is a little child. Obi-Wan
Yeah.
is a you know uh, kind of a pompous punk. The Queen is 14. Like, but a huge problem was like, who is Qui-Gon Jinn? Like, why is he
Hmm.
here? This should be Obi-Wan Kenobi. And
Yes.
the killer is the in the original version, in the original draft, that is Obi-Wan
It
Kenobi.
is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
son of a, you had it and you lost it. And that's some of the behind the scenes stuff that happened. And
Hmm.
he didn't want Obi-Wan to basically take the hit, take a hit to his reputation. And so he just conjured this new character who would all the blame would be on him. And I thought,
Hmm.
oh, that's the wrong call. That's not, the beauty of Star Wars is Obi-Wan's speech of from a
Yeah.
certain point of view. You lied to me. Not really. From a certain point of view.
Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
that's going back to the Bible, and the Bible has inspired so many great movies,
Hmm.
and George Lucas has said, yeah, you got some stuff from the Bible. That's the teachings of Jesus. There's so many people around Jesus who are like, what do you mean? Stop speaking in parables. But that's Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? From a certain point of view, and Luke
Yeah.
wrestles with it. It's like, he's right. He's right. From a certain point of view, he's absolutely right. But not in the moment. In the moment, he's angry.
Yeah. And I know if you probably have read The Secret History of Star Wars.
Yeah, I believe so.
That's a very fascinating book, and there's so many ideas that George Lucas came up with, could have went with, that would have been so much better for these films. It baffles me why he didn't. And the one thing, and I kind of had a problem with the prequels, was with Attack of the Clones, when they create a clone army and to fight the droid army, and they call it the Clone Wars. I'm thinking to myself, when I remember seeing that, and I said, why isn't it called the Droid Wars? Like, why the
That's right.
clones? Only one side has clones. But originally, George Lucas was going to have two sides had clones,
Yeah.
because the opposing army was actually going to be a army of cloned Mandalorian shock troopers
Mm-hmm.
to go up against the Republic clones. Now, if you have two armies of clones, it makes more sense that you would call it the Clone Wars.
Yeah. That I remember that bothering me as well, not adhering to, those very sacred little morsels that you left. Like, I thought the whole backstory that you need is there. Yoda told
Mm-hmm.
and Obi-Wan, to sit down on the log and talking about your father was already a great pilot, and that should have been sacred to the story. And instead it was like, well, let's squeeze in that the little boy is good at pod racing, and like that, this isn't flowing. This isn't what you set up. And he changed things. I mean, the ages were established that Anakin in the prequels should have been, I think, in his late 20s or 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Obi-Wan should have already been pretty much an old man, like
Yeah.
in his 40s or 50s. And he tweaked it in order to cater more to the young crowd to sell more toys and movie tickets. And, you know, I get why he did it. Families to feed.
Mm-hmm.
Lucasfilm was a company with a lot of, employees and families to feed, but it was at the expense of something. It was at the expense of this beautifully crafted saga. It took a sharp, left turn from it had been, I thought, such a fun, wholesome, and spiritual story, the original Star Wars trilogy. It was, all about the Force is stronger than any of these technological terrors. And
Mm-hmm.
then the prequels got away from that. And
Yeah.
I just don't buy the argument of, well, it was a different era in the prequels. I, I know that they take place before, but just it was all too slick and too much special effects, and they just got away from the importance of the spirituality of the Force. I
Yeah.
felt it in the original trilogy, and I never felt in the prequel trilogy. I mean, a good example of what I'm talking about is when Qui-Gon Jinn kneels before he dies. when he's about to face Maul for the final time. He
Hmm.
kneels and he's meditating, and shot differently, that could have been one of those moments where we
Yeah.
really feel the Force. Um, bring down, and there's a little bit of armchair directing here, but bring down the music, bring down the chaos, allow Qui-Gon Jinn. Liam was trying, right? That's
Hmm.
what he was told to do, so he's trying, but it isn't conveyed in the movie for me a sense of calm coming to him from the Force. Instead, it's just like the way it's shot is like round one, round two,
Yeah.
the serenity. They didn't capture the serenity of the scene where a different director could have really brought you, to connect with Qui-Gon, connect with the Force, give you a sense of beauty in the middle of this chaos, this insanity, this war that's going on, what the Force can do for you. And I mean, the Force is God. It's spirituality.
Hmm.
That's not a stretch to say that. Um, and they could have done that. They could have really shown Qui-Gon achieving calmness, Zen, um, through the Force, and instead it's just comes off more like a breather.
Yeah.
So when I
Yeah.
say like the prequels lack that spirituality, that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about right there.
Yeah, and I find in the prequels, the characters are like they're kind of cold and
Yeah.
like emotionless somehow. The Jedi, like,
Right.
and what's kind of
They lack
interesting
love.
about, yeah, and
I,
what's
I
kind of,
thought I thought the Jedi would be like, like the good kind of priest or pastor, the good kind of holy man, like the ones who really live the word of Christ. And the Jedi are just so impersonal and like cops in the prequels.
Mhm. And but what's interesting I found about that is when I was reading The Secret History of Star Wars. Well, I've read the book and I listened to the audiobook of that. It's that all the complaints I heard people say about how the characters are in the prequels, how they're detached, emotionless, things like that. Those were all the exact same complaints George Lucas's ex-wife had about him. So it
Oh,
must be
really?
something that kind of came off part of his personality that came off the page and somehow got into the characters. Because if you
Hmm.
look at the original trilogy, he didn't create that in a vacuum by any
No.
stretch. His wife helped him edit it a lot. She added a lot of humor to those movies,
Yeah.
especially with The Empire Strikes Back. You had Gary Kurtz and I forget the director. They were
Mark Wong.
away from George Lucas and they kind of got to do their own thing, and that was one of the best Star Wars film.
Yeah. Irvin
And
Kershner.
yeah, yes, and they put a lot of their own philosophy and stuff like that. So when you get to the prequels, all those people are gone.
Yeah. I mean, I I know the prequels would have been better if he was more collaborative.
Hmm.
It's not a theory, exactly like Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I mean, that's what supports my argument. He did it. He proved it.
Yeah.
Like they're great.
Hmm.
But again, I can't I understand too much what he went through. So I can't say what an idiot. Why did he do this? I get it. Like it
Hmm.
cost him all too much time, too much stress. It cost him his wife. It was just all too much. And so I see the guy making the prequels the way he did. And no, I don't
Yeah.
want any help. Leave me alone. I've earned the right. I'm like, you know what? You have. I love your first three movies, George, Uncle George. These would be so much better if you would do them like you did the first three. But if anyone's earned the right, you have. So
Hmm.
go ahead and do what you need to do and let whoever enjoys them enjoy them. And I try not to be part of the fandom menace and like, why didn't you do better? Like, you know what? The answer to that question, why didn't you do better? Because if anyone are in the right to do them however damn well he wanted to, it was George
Hmm.
Lucas.
But I will say this about the prequels: despite their flaws, they they are, for me anyway, personally, they are fun to watch. And the Phantom Menace is the last movie that I have that I kind of feel like a nostalgia for when I watch it. It's almost like that was the last movie That was like the cutoff point for nostalgia for me, if that makes sense.
The movie itself wasn't wasn't a fantastic experience, but I love and this is when you got to look at the silver linings and get what you
Mm-hmm.
can instead of just all or nothing. Um, the hype, the buildup, the anticipation and excitement of Phantom Menace was fun. Waiting in line, seeing it with friends, that was all great. So
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. It's like when a bad movie comes out, but it revived something.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Dial of Destiny is bad. I haven't seen it yet, but it just came out and with it brought a tidal wave of old indie stuff with it, like a bunch of new indie figures from the old indie movies. Anytime anything Star Wars comes out, we get an OT stuff along with it, maybe even books in the OT era. So I like that the Phantom Menace brought the experience of being excited for a Star Wars movie in a theater.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget finishing the movie and looking over at my friend and looking confused. And he looked at me confused. And we were like, was this bad? We weren't
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Now, when I first saw it, and upon initially watching it, I liked the movie, but it kind of like I could see the flaws more and more
Oh
upon
yeah.
repeat viewings, but I couldn't really articulate what I didn't like about it. And until I kind of got more on the internet, and then YouTube became more of a thing, and then I
Right.
could watch people, and then it was like the light was shown on. Okay, this is why this is not working for me. I couldn't really put it into words, but and what's interesting is because I've been watching your stuff for a long time, probably because I started watching you when you were doing Armchair Directors, like before you had your toy channel. And I remember that was the very first video I stumbled upon, Armchair Directors, was your guys' review of the Phantom Menace. Because I was just watching all these reviews of the Phantom Menace. For some reason, I was just seeing what all these different fans thought. So I was
That
putting,
feels like a lifetime ago.
yeah, it was a while ago. So
When
all
those
these,
videos pop up and I see Crandall and this guy who kind of looks like me, a younger version of me, I just think, wow, like that's a totally different human being right there. I mean, it's fascinating to have an archive of old movie reviews, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't feel that way about that movie anymore, and you
mhm.
know, hopefully a little more easygoing on stuff I used to hate. But yeah, appreciate you watching Armchair all the way. All
Yeah.
back those years.
Yeah, that would have been maybe 2013, I think, maybe 2014.
Do you
I
remember
found
what I
that
said
video.
about Phantom Menace? Was I hard on it?
I remember in the the one thing that stood out to me is you said you refused to acknowledge it as canon.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
You
one
said
thing that
it just
hasn't really changed. I mean, I've always been about headcanon, and so
Mhm.
I call them fan films now. You know, Phantom Menace is a pretty
Yeah.
good fan film.
Yeah.
It's
And
just funny that George Lucas made a Star Wars fan film.
mhm. Yeah, and it's interesting, like and as far as like I remember being really excited when I heard Disney bought Star Wars. And I
Yeah.
remember a friend of mine, we were talking about it, and I said, I can't wait. These are going to be awesome.
Yep.
And then he says and he was skeptical. He said, oh, I don't know. I would hold off on that. And I
Yeah.
said, no, I said, there's no way. There's no way they're going to be worse than the prequels. Disney will do a good job.
I, I
That statement didn't age very well.
I remember hearing a few people being skeptical too, and I was like, but Disney, they get it because it's kind of funny. When I was growing up, Disney was like the oh no, not Disney, because they were just so
Mhm.
cookie cutter Disney movies. And
Yeah.
then they got really good there for a while. Like, wow, every single Disney movie is not just great action, but got a lot of heart and soul to it. And they seemed like the
Mhm.
custodians of the heart and soul of Hollywood. So I was excited about it. And then it just, you know, times change. So now, more often than not, when I see something with the Disney on it, again, I've come full circle and I go, oh no, not Disney. But 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 for totally different
Yeah.
reasons now, and it's actually quite opposite the reasons I wasn't really excited about Disney movies as a kid. Now it's like just
Hmm.
there's so much of the social, it's not about the story and the people.
Yeah.
It's about we are pushing an agenda
Yeah.
and we are using this character as a vehicle and we're using this situation, this universe as a vehicle. Like it was never in, I know Star Wars was created as kind of a commentary on the Vietnam War, among other things in the
Hmm.
70s, but it just
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be in the spirit.
Yeah. No, what they're doing is not quite the same thing as that. And it gets to the point where, and there for a while, I was kind of on the bandwagon of really hating on Disney Star Wars. And then I just got to the point where I just didn't care anymore.
It's taken care of. Like there's enough people out there doing it so that you
Yeah.
don't have to worry about that. There, some people are working 24/7 hating Star Wars, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
okay. You don't have to worry about it. It's taken care of.
Yeah. There's other people doing the heavy lifting. And as far as I'm concerned, all the arguments have been made. That there's
That's
nothing
true.
more you can say about it. And it gets to the point like I just kind of got to the point where I just kind of gave up on Star Wars. Like I don't even get excited about it anymore. Like even with the new Ahsoka show that came out last weekend, I was going through my different streaming services and I was thinking, well, that Ahsoka is on there, and then I recently had gotten Paramount Plus, so I'm looking on just seeing what they have on there, and I was going to watch Ahsoka, and then I come across, oh, hold on. They've got all 10 seasons of Beverly Hills 90210 on here. I'm going to watch that instead. So, that's something I would have never imagined I would pick over Star Wars, Beverly Hills 90210, but I did. That's the point
Yeah.
I'm at now.
How does 90210 measure up to the book?
Well, to be honest,
Was it a
they
book? I'm just kidding here.
no, Beverly Hills 90210. No, I don't think
Yeah.
it was a book. Just
Oh, it should be. It should
yeah.
be a big book series.
But yeah, so that's kind of like where I'm kind of at with it now. Kind of like with what you said, if something doesn't give you joy anymore, you just walk away from it.
Yeah, exactly. I get it too. It's still fun. It can be. Star Wars can be fun to talk
Mhm.
about and talk about divergent timelines. What if they had done this? What if they had done that? Man, I'd love to see some Star Wars what if, like they did with
Yeah.
Marvel. What if this? What if that? I'd love to see
Mhm.
some animated movies of Timothy Zahn's trilogy because that
Yes.
that hasn't changed for me. Timothy Zahn's trilogy is my canon Star Wars sequel trilogy, and I take a little bit here and there. Like my idea of canon makes no sense to a lot of people who are very, very all or nothing. It has to be, that's it. I mean, it was on screen, so Mandalorian is the law. And I'm like, I like some of Mandalorian. I don't like some of Mandalorian.
Mhm.
I'll enjoy what I enjoy, and I'll just ignore what I don't like, and I'll even skip scenes if I'm rewatching something.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Yes, you can. The button
Mhm.
exists for a reason. You're allowed to just skip stuff and pick and choose.
And
There's two types of fans. Like there's the fans who have the confidence and the just I don't know what other word you can use to say it, but like just to say, look, I know what I like and I know what I don't like.
Mhm.
And then you got your other fans who are just they're consumers, they're audience, and they're just give me more. And they don't discern and pick and choose. They're not picky, right? They're just like, give it all to me. It's all canon, it's all official.
Mhm. Now there are still things about Star Wars that I will get excited for. And for example, like the most recent thing, and this got me more excited than any Disney announcement of any new show, any new movie, anything. When I saw the news for this, I couldn't wait to get this. And it was a Barnes and Noble leather-bound edition of the Bounty Hunter Wars.
Ooh.
That was a trilogy of books that was published back in the 90s. And I bought it as like and kind of one of those omnibuses. It was all three of them in one big book, but I had gotten it through the science fiction book club back. It was kind of like between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. It was around like 99. And, and I absolutely just read that book cover to cover. And it was a weird um, situation because that book kind of helped me quit smoking at the time.
Oh,
I
good.
was smoking 2 packs a day back in 99. And I had gotten this really bad lung infection in the wintertime. That was kind
Oh,
of
no.
close to Christmas. And I was just totally off my feet for 2 solid weeks. I couldn't do anything. So all I did was just read that book. And it was awesome. I loved it. And I still have that edition. And then I saw that they were doing this leather bound edition, and couldn't wait. As soon as it came out, I ordered it off the Barnes and Noble website, had it, and it was just a beautiful book,
Oh, that's
just
great.
beautiful. So there are certain things about Star Wars that I still get excited for.
That's one nice thing, not to just exclusively crap on Disney, but that's one thing. They took all the books and said they don't count anymore, which I said,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see about that. But I got to hand it to them that they didn't just throw them in the vault and try to wipe them out like the
Yeah.
holiday special, like George with the holiday special, but they released old stuff that doesn't count as legends
Mm-hmm.
or whatever they call it, multiverse, whatever. But I love that Disney has okayed the release of the Zahn trilogy.
Yeah.
Like it's too good to just say, no, it never happened. Please ignore it. Kind of
Yeah.
like the Gendy Clone Wars series. They just wanted to wipe that off the face of the earth and act like it never existed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, now that this multiverse idea has been introduced in both Marvel and DC, it's okay. It's all right to say, I don't want to have anything to do with this. This is my cup of tea, not this.
Yeah.
So it's cool that they're reissuing stuff like that. Sometimes you don't need more new and more. Sometimes you just need to pull something out of the storage box, and that's what they're doing. Taking an old favorite
Mm-hmm.
and leather bound is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's a gorgeous book. And then the other way that I've kind of been getting to enjoy Star Wars outside of all the Disney stuff, and it goes back to the books, is me and a friend of mine. We hit all the used bookstores, all the Value Villages, Salvation Armies, everything, hunting down those old Star Wars paperbacks.
Oh, that's cool. They made so
Yeah.
many of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I used to love Casablanca books, downtown Kitchener. They'd have a whole bunch of them for next to nothing, $3, $5. Tons of them, tons of Star Trek and Star Wars right underneath them.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't necessarily fantastic, but they were good. And sometimes that's really all you need. Not every book you read, especially one that takes place in a established universe, has to be the best thing to ever happen to the property. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's nice to just see a little side story with Wedge.
Mm-hmm.
Just spend some
And
time with an old friend.
yeah, and some of the I think Star Wars, I think it translates really well over to novels and comic books.
Oh yeah,
And
almost better. I'd say better now.
yeah, and I don't know if you've ever read these comics or not, but it was like kind of like my first dip into the expanded universe. These comics came out back in the mid '90s, but it was Star Wars: Tales of the Jedi, Dark Lords of the Sith,
No, I never.
and it was a
Never read those.
6-part miniseries. And I remember the artwork was really, really captivating, really drew me in, and I collected all 6 of them. They had these really gorgeous painted covers. They were almost like movie posters. They were really, really good, really good. And they've been reprinted a few times, but yeah, so that was probably my first. So that 6 set of comics, that's something I have a lot of nostalgia for.
And the really nice
Is
thing
that.
about Tales of the Jedi would have been a different time period, but the thing I love about comics is that it's not restricted by the same thing that the movies are restricted by. So the
Mhm.
movies, they had to throw so much money at the original cast to get them to come back. And then, too much time had passed. We weren't seeing Luke at the age we wanted to see him,
Yeah.
as the Jedi in his 30s. No fault of Mark Hamill.
Yeah.
They never called to get the job done. And that's why that Mandalorian, or the 2 Mandalorian episodes with was it Mandalorian and one Boba Fett? See, it's just,
Yeah, I think it was
can't keep it
a
straight
Boba Fett.
anymore.
Yeah, there was Boba Fett that Luke appeared in.
Yeah, it can't
And
keep it
this
straight
was,
anymore. less is more, right? Just
Yeah,
have it be
yeah.
Luke in the
It's
Mandalorian. But getting to see Luke at that age, even though it's, you know,
yeah,
CGI, deep fake trickery, um, that's what we wanted to see. Original
yeah,
trilogy fans.
yeah. That's what fans wanted to see in that Disney trilogy, something like that. And I remember seeing that, and that gave me chills to see that, to watch that.
And the you can do that in the comics, and you don't have to deal with money. I'm sure Mark, you know, if they use and they need to use all the actors' likenesses in the comics, like come on, draw him to look like the actor and flip the actor a couple bucks to use his likeness. But
Hmm.
what I've always loved about the comics, that you get to see that time period between Return of the Jedi and whatever the first sequel movie was called, the Force Awakens.
Yeah,
You get to
which
see that glory days
yeah,
period.
which honestly, when I first saw The Force Awakens, I thought it wasn't too bad, and I was excited to see where they were going to take the story. And then it was the second one that just killed it for me. And I
Yeah.
walked out of the theater, and it felt like someone had, like, the movie felt like someone had slapped me in the face.
Hmm. I do you remember my armchair review of Force Awakens?
No, I can't remember that one.
I put a band-aid on my heart
Oh, did you?
to, to represent, if people can indulge me to be a little dramatic, but I was loving it. My wife and I went to see it. We were super excited. Oh my God, the band is back together. The old cast is back. Mark
Hmm.
Hamill's name is, I think it was second on the poster behind Harrison Ford.
Hmm.
So it's like, okay, he might not be in the entire movie, but he's going to have a substantial role. And then the combination of Mark Hamill being in it for a couple seconds, and they cross that line that the original trilogy would never ever cross.
Yeah.
And so that was me just saying, look, Star Wars is not what it used to be. The original Star Wars would never have. And you know, I feel like I've said this 1,000 times now, but you never know. Someone might be watching for the first time and hasn't heard me say it 100 times already. But in my Star Wars, a son does not murder his father in cold blood,
Hmm.
face to
And
face. Like it
it,
doesn't it
it,
doesn't happen in my Star Wars.
and the other thing is, it's this weird time where they want to, like, destroy our heroes or something to
That
make it
whole thing,
more.
that's an entire other discussion.
Yeah, and
That's a
and
10-hour
uh,
discussion.
and the only other time that I kind of felt like that the last time I felt like a movie made me feel the way The Last Jedi made me feel was Star Trek, Generations, when they killed Kirk and the way
Yeah.
they killed him. I remember leaving that theater and I was like, oh, what? That was
Yeah,
the first time I was really let down by a Star Trek movie.
that one felt like we need to kill Kirk, find a way, instead of write the story and here's where the story will take us. And if Kirk dies because it's fitting for the story, then he dies. But it just seemed to me like that was the edict. Put him in a situation where he dies, and he just,
Hmm.
to this day, like that's what you came up with. Like, come
Yeah.
on, man. Captain Kirk, for him to have a fitting death, should have been shot into a sun and made it explode.
Yeah, or something. Or I don't know why, or just leave him alive. Like, just let him have a happy ending. He
Yep.
retires and he settles down with Carol Marcus and they live a life or something,
Yeah.
right?
What's wrong with the Spock Prime death that he got in Star Trek Beyond? Just they get a call, Spock has passed away. Like they never do that for
Hmm.
heroes anymore. But I mean, Leonard Nimoy had passed away, so there wasn't much they could do. But
Yeah.
I thought that was handled so perfectly
Yeah, it
that
was.
it
Yeah.
just it was real life blending with the movie. Like just the, you know, sometimes they want movies to be like real life. Well, that was like real life, just getting a call out of the blue. And guess what? This person that you have a great deal of respect for and that you thought you'd see him another 1,000 times, he's gone. Your last conversation with him was your last conversation with him. You got so
Hmm.
much left unsaid, and you'll never see him again. Just poof, this incredible, special human being is gone. And you want real life? That was real life, but it was handled so
Hmm.
perfectly. And I thought, as a send off to Leonard Nimoy and Spock, his version of Spock. I was like, good for you guys for not trying to come up with some convoluted situation in which Spock sacrifices himself and they use a body double. And no,
Hmm.
I thought it was just great to take that route that, you know, the guy just had a peaceful death. And I
Yeah.
wish more heroes either just don't even, uh, you know, deal with it, don't even mention it, or if you have to, because they really didn't have to mention in Star Trek Beyond that Spock passed
Yeah.
away.
No, they
They,
didn't.
they could have just ignored it, right? But then,
Hmm.
you know, there's backlash of like, you didn't mention Leonard Nimoy dying.
Yeah.
So I thought that was actually the perfect way to do it.
Yeah. And they left the character off on a good place. He was gone back to help rebuild build New Vulcan, things
Yeah.
like that. So yeah.
Refreshing that he wasn't deconstructed, torn down. And
Yeah.
like, I get that's appropriate for characters when they got a little more pep in their step.
Hmm.
You can put characters through the mill. That's how you make a great character. I that absolutely it's important. You know, a lot of characters we talked about.
Well,
Luke
and that,
Skywalker is on top of that, right? He gets put through
yeah.
the mill.
And that kind of, to bring it back to Dune, depends on what you're trying to do with that character. So, like the character of Paul has, if when once you go through all the books, he has a bad ending, you know,
Yeah.
and
Spoiler.
as you go further through the books and stuff. But his character was meant to convey a certain message, where Luke Skywalker was supposed to be one of hope, and he's kind of
Yeah,
like Superman, right?
you don't get
So
to
you,
change it in midstream. Like,
yeah, you know, it's like it's one thing if they had made the original trilogy was actually 6 movies and it was the rise and fall of Luke Skywalker and it was meant to be that way and all that was set up in those movies, where like when you read Dune, all the seeds for Paul's eventual fall is kind of planted in that first and it goes on
that's right.
through. And where Luke Skywalker, he's meant to be, he was the, you know, he was went on to become a Jedi, and you know, he brought back light to the galaxy and he redeemed his father, and then all that just gets undone and
Yeah,
kind of
the
sucks.
scene in Return of the Jedi where he throws the lightsaber away is him giving up his life for his father. And his
Hmm.
father could be dead within moments too. The Emperor could kill Luke and then, you too. But
Hmm.
that's the scene right there that shows you that Luke Skywalker is operating on a different plane than most people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's very Christ-like because Christ speaks in terms of eternity, immortal soul. So someone's
Hmm.
like, "Oh, well, you know, we might die." And from Christ's perspective, like, so, I mean, the immortal soul exists longer than your mortal body. Things will
Hmm.
be okay, you know, once you go through hell. Luke Skywalker is
Yeah.
like that. Like, he might die, but his integrity, his love for his
Yeah.
father was more important to him than surviving in that moment. And some people who their only purpose in life is just to live the longest life, not necessarily quality of life, but quantity.
But the
They
longest
think
life.
they
Yeah.
win if they live 98 years. That's not how Luke Skywalker was wired. And that's why the sequel trilogy to me, I'm one of many people who felt like I just don't buy into this. Well, it's been many years.
Hmm.
Okay, that's possible in real life, but in movies, like you've got this incredible ray of light, and why are you dimming a ray of light? They're so rare. Same with Superman. Like it's so rare to have such a pure, inspiring ray of light. Why would you dim it?
Hmm.
To be cool, to tell, you know, one interesting story, one interesting movie. I just think it's the wrong call. So when people are like, Superman wouldn't do that, you know, when he breaks the neck, or Optimus wouldn't do that when he says, I'll kill them all. Like
Yeah.
it's
That's
it's true.
yeah. And talking about like adaptations, like that's another one that they seem to not understand is Optimus Prime, from how he is to the cartoons and adapting that to film.
I think it's one of the things that strange coincidence that it's happening so often, that they're taking so many of these really inspiring, pure, hopeful characters, selfless, loving characters, and they're doing that to so many different ones in different movie studios, different movie properties, something's going on. Um, I don't spend too
Hmm.
much time theorizing and coming up with conspiracy theories, but it's connected somehow. Like it's just it happens too often for
Yeah.
something to not be going on behind the scenes.
Well, I think it's kind of just like maybe a trend. Like, everything has a trend to, and I think that's kind of what it is. They want to take these, it's almost like they want to give like a hero. It's like they want to turn every good hero into an anti-hero, or like a Wolverine or something like that.
Yeah, just make
Wolverine's
it so.
already a broken character, and he's, so that works for him. But like
Yeah,
Optimus Prime isn't,
yeah,
and like the other thing, like Optimus Prime would never like kill a human, like never.
yeah,
The Optimus Prime that I know.
exactly. And especially not for a joke. But
Hmm.
that's when someone is handling these properties and they're not treating it like it's sacred. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they don't treat anything sacred, and so why would they treat any? If you don't treat anything sacred, why would you treat anything sacred? You know,
Hmm.
if there are no lines that you would not cross for profit, then you're given Superman or you're given Optimus Prime. Maybe you're even given Jesus Christ. You're doing a movie about Jesus,
Hmm.
the character that inspired Superman and Optimus Prime
Yeah.
and all these characters. But if the person who is doing the movie with Jesus Christ, if they're motivated by money instead of, Jesus Christ, worshiping Jesus Christ, then there are no lines they will not cross. They'll give them a machine gun.
Hmm.
It's like Gandhi 2 in UHF, this time it's war.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's no lines that will not be crossed. And unfortunately
Yeah.
that's, Hollywood, that the people in charge get to make the ultimate decisions. It's so unfortunate that there isn't really, other than voting with your wallet, there isn't a voting system
Hmm.
in Hollywood. And
Yeah.
there
There's.
has to be a pretty major, like it sucks that you go see a bad movie and they get to keep your money. So they
Hmm.
chalk it up as a win. It's like, can I get my money back if I hate a movie? Like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah, because I recently watched the latest Transformers film. I think it was Rise of the Beasts.
Beast something?
Yeah,
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
me and a friend of mine watched that, but it wasn't bad. But still, it's like, and then after the movie was over, I looked at my friend and I said, "You know something? They got all the money in the world. They got all the special effects. They can hire all the whatever kind of writers they want. And they still cannot top the '86 animated film."
Yeah.
They still can't top. That's still my favorite Transformers movie. Is that
That
one?
thing was lightning in a bottle. As good as
Hmm.
the TV show had been before the movie came out, that thing was just pure magic.
Yeah.
That was firing on all cylinders. It just got it right. It
Oh
danced
yeah.
that fine line. Like
Hmm.
it was mutilating, horrifically killing off beloved characters, but it didn't do it to Prime. Like it sucks what
Hmm.
happened to Prowl and Ironhide, but Prime had the ultimate, not ultimate warrior, but he had the ultimate death of a warrior, I should
Yeah.
say.
They very good death in that. Yeah.
And I always say Prime is what he is today because of the death he had in that movie. Leonidas is what he is today because of
Hmm.
his death at Thermopylae. And for anyone
Yeah.
who isn't familiar with King Leonidas of Sparta, 300, I guess, is the easiest way
Hmm.
to get the history. But Leonidas wouldn't be what he is today. He'd be just like any other forgotten king. But because
Yeah.
he marched into unwinnable circumstances, and he said, "No, I won't win, but I'm going to make them look different." He
Yeah.
will never be forgotten throughout time. And his, the Spartan battle cry, their motto of Molon Labe. I use it often when
Hmm.
everyone is like, you have to do things like this, or you need to stop doing this. Molon Labe, come and do it. Or if. Did you ever hear the
Hmm.
story about the note that he sent back, or one of the Spartan kings sent back this note? Um, they were threatened with being invaded. If you don't do as we say, we will send all our soldiers and invade Sparta. And the Spartan king sent back a note, one word, if. Like, man, that's awesome. But getting back to
Hmm.
Prime, like that death in the movie, as hard as it hit a lot of kids, he didn't go down like a punk, like
No, he didn't.
he took it all, and even his death in the end is a sacrifice. Like, if it's me or Hot Rod, it's me. I can't let Hot
Hmm.
Rod die. And then the age old people love to debate about how Hot Rod got Optimus Prime killed, and I go, no, I think Megatron got Optimus Prime killed actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when I saw that movie as a kid, like that is the strongest part of that movie because me and my friends, when we played Transformers, we would always reenact that part of the movie, like
Yeah,
over and over and over again. The battle at Autobot City, things like that.
the really important part about Prime's death is that he lives on at the very end of the movie.
Hmm.
If they had not included that little ghostly voiceover when Hot Rod is opening the Matrix, then it would have been sad. Like, oh, great
Yeah.
movie, but Prime died. But I walked out of that movie so happy because Prime didn't die. His body died, his robot body, but his spirit lived on, and that's a pretty wild concept that these robots have immortal souls. But that's
Hmm.
basically what we were being told. And when Simon Furman came up with the spirituality of Transformers and Primus,
Yeah.
he didn't really. I mean, he really fleshed it out a lot, but the spirituality was actually already there. The blueprints,
Hmm.
the groundwork was already there in the movie, with out of nowhere, like Prime having that disembodied Obi-Wan Kenobi style of voice and endorsing Hot Rod. That's why I never blamed Hot Rod, because
Yeah.
Prime endorsed him, forgave him, and endorsed him, and said, "You're the new guy." You gave him his new name, Rodimus Prime. First time we ever hear the name Rodimus Prime, it's being told to us by Optimus Prime,
Yeah.
passing the torch, endorsing him, encouraging him. And so I just never had a problem with his death. I'm like, yeah, he died and he lives on. And then he literally came back in a new body and all that. But without that movie, Prime would be Matt Tracker.
Hmm.
He'd be Quicksilver, he'd be Lion-O. Still
Yeah.
pretty well loved, but not the
Yeah.
pinnacle.
Yeah. And they were gonna do that with the GI Joe animated movie. I think they were gonna kill
Duke.
off Duke the same way. But then they
Yeah, that
got
was
cold
Buzz's
feet.
idea. That was
They
Buzz Dixon's idea.
they
And
got
he really fought for it.
and I guess they got cold feet. But you think about it, which one of the two movies is much more revered and much more remembered? It's
No,
the
that's a great
Transformers one.
that's a great comparison actually, because that's two different timelines diverging.
Hmm.
What if we saw what happened when Prime did die and launched him, and when Duke didn't die, he just got injured, and it's like, who cares about Duke? I mean, does Duke ever come up in discussion of great 80s iconic heroes?
Hmm.
There's He-Man, there's Prime, Lion-O sometimes gets brought up. I'll always bring up Bravestar. Duke just kind of, even in his own team, he's kind of lost in the shuffle behind
Hmm.
Hawk and Snake Eyes and Flint a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, because that was always one of my. Well, that's one of the ones that a lot of guys liked. It was, and a lot of friends of mine like was Snake Eyes. He was like pretty
Yeah.
popular character because he looked so cool and things like that.
Yeah, I don't know if they had just did the scene the way it was written and decided that's the end of Duke. That's, he does die with a snake spear to the heart, sacrificing himself for his brother. I don't know if that would have been the entrenched him as the legend that it did for Prime, because that
Hmm.
was kind of more of a punk death, getting killed by Serpentor, stabbed with a weird snake. Cobra Law movie, it isn't the greatest movie either.
Hmm.
Duke would have needed to have a much more fitting, like Leonidas style death,
Yeah.
going up against insurmountable odds, probably with a squad. If I can do a little armchair directing here, do a little bit of rewrite myself, I would have him go out with a bunch of guys, not just by himself, but him and his squad, just like Leonidas and the 300 Spartans. They all go down. And so, because GI Joe, the team is so important, more
Hmm.
important than the individual members, that it would be Duke. Sorry to say, gung ho. If we're just strictly clearing off the old stock, yep, Breaker, Flash. Not all of them, but the whole team would get wiped out. But man, would that ever change the tone
Oh
of
yeah.
GI Joe?
And when I was a kid, and I know, like, I know some people don't really like that they killed off so many of the original Transformers in that movie, but I remember thinking when I was a kid and I watched all that, one thing about the Transformers cartoon that kind of bugged me a little bit as a kid is they would just like unload all these rounds on each other, but it's like they would just the blast would just knock the Transformer back, and they wouldn't
Yeah,
really seem like they wouldn't really sustain any damage. But when I see those guys were actually like dying on that from the Decepticons attacking them, I thought, wow, okay, now there's some stakes.
yeah,
So it
yeah.
gave the movie more stakes.
Immediately, like within the first 5 minutes, some of
Yeah.
your all-time favorites have been horrifically killed, and I just took that to mean, wow, it's been a rough 20 years, because it's also quick, right? It's
Hmm.
just bam, bam, we're bombarded with, all right, you've been watching the show for 2 years, we've jumped ahead 20 years. What? Okay, I better go with it, or I'm gonna be miserable for the next 90 minutes. And then they get slaughtered, and like, okay, I guess
Hmm.
they've been really weak for 20 years, so what used to just bounce off of them or knock them back 20 years ago is now just going to go through them like a hot knife through
Hmm.
butter. They're running on fumes, so
Yeah.
that's what I immediately how I explain it. Like, oh, they're running on fumes, and so the fact that Prime's death was the way it was isn't just wow he took a beating, but he was running on fumes, and that's what he
Hmm.
was able to accomplish on fumes. So again, like, wow, what a hero, incredible.
And another thing, I think this has to play a part in how that movie is remembered, but that movie has one of the best soundtracks for a movie
Yeah,
ever.
Spectre
Like
General
I've got that on
ambush.
CD. Well, I've got one I bought like a long time ago off Amazon. Like so long ago, I had to dial a 1-800 number to order it.
Oh really?
So, yeah, off of Amazon. But I have the original CD soundtrack for that movie.
By Scotty
And then
Brothers. Yeah.
then they re-released it again, like a 25th anniversary edition of it that has more extra tracks and stuff like that.
With Vince
So
DiCola's score on it.
yes, yeah, and so
Yeah.
it has some stuff that wasn't on that original soundtrack, and so even to this day, I've listened to that like I don't know how many times. It's got so many cool songs on it, and it's that would be like one of my top five um, soundtracks. Would be that one, and it'd be up the same thing with the soundtrack for the first 79 Superman film would be
I
up
always
there too.
recommend it. Like for anyone who isn't really keen on going to the gym, especially if they're getting up in years and they have a lot of aches and pains, put that soundtrack on.
Hmm.
Hunger and nothing's going to stand in our way. Sometimes all you need is just a start to get your
Yeah.
momentum going, and it's really tough. That first 5 minutes is so tough. It feels impossible, but it's not impossible. And if you got the right soundtrack playing for you, it's just like in the movies, the right soundtrack,
It
the
is, yeah.
hero can do anything with the right soundtrack. Like in
Yeah.
Batman Begins, always insurmountable odds, but then like,
Hmm.
yeah, give yourself an inspiring soundtrack, and within 5 minutes, once the joints start to get move in and loosened up, warmed up a little bit, then you'll be able to do
Hmm.
your body some good.
Yeah. Now, I guess staying on the lines of toys, what did you think of the 87 Masters of the Universe film?
Oh, um, well, you can find out by listening to my and Eric's commentary on this channel. We did
Oh yeah, that's right. You did do a
commentary
commentary,
on
yeah.
this channel for that movie, and it's fun as long as you don't think about the cartoon. I
Hmm.
remember really not liking it as a kid because it was nothing like the Filmation cartoon. Like, what are you guys
Yeah, it
doing? Why
wasn't.
why is this totally different? And just for the time, like there wasn't a lot. It's not like today where there's like
Yeah,
20
with
different
versions of stuff. Yeah.
continuities. Yeah, exactly. Back then it was like, yeah, I know there was a mini comic and that's more what they were going for, but come on, like
Hmm.
the thing was the Filmation show. It was a golden opportunity to really just do a live action interpretation of the Filmation cartoon.
Now,
It was cheap. I mean, they filming
yeah.
most of the movie on Earth as a way to save money I'm again not in the spirit of the thing that they're adapting, just because bean counters are saying we'll be able to do this cheaper this way.
Yeah. Now, for me, I love that movie.
Oh, really? Good.
I know it's a terrible adaptation of He-Man, but when I watched it as a kid, like I just loved it. Me and another friend of mine, we just watched that thing like over and over and over again. And when I was thinking about it, why do I like that movie so much? And because it's one of those things I couldn't pin down in my head as a kid. But now as an adult, when I watch that movie, it's Frank Langella's Skeletor.
There you go. Yeah,
That's
he's
why I love that
amazing.
movie. Like
Yes,
it's not for He-Man at all. It's because me and
saving
my
grace.
buddy thought Skeletor was such an awesome villain in that film.
He
And
definitely is.
that was one of the when they started doing the Masters classics, that was one of my like dream action figures. I said I hope someday they do uh, the Frank Langella Skeletor from that movie,
And they did.
and they did, and I was all over that. I remember as soon as it was on Big Bad Toy Store, I ordered it. That was like one of those like where I don't have a lot of space for action figures. I'm really choosy. It's got to be like it's got to give me that feeling of I have to have this, and that figure did it for me, and
Mm.
I got it right away. And I didn't. I got like a couple more, but I didn't bother with the He-Man one. I just
Mm.
got the Skeletor one.
The Dolph. Dolph
Yeah.
certainly had the look, but
Hmm.
um, I don't know if there was the perfect guy to play He-Man back then. I don't know if there is the perfect guy today to play him.
Yeah, it's
I
a
don't know.
hard.
John
It'd be a
Irwin
hard
might
one to cast.
John Irwin might be the perfect He-Man, just voice only. And
Hmm.
the guy in the new animated series I thought was really good.
Yeah,
But
and yeah, which I didn't mind that animated series. I thought it was.
shh, you're not allowed to say anything good about it or not scathing about it. No, in all honesty, like I reviewed it
Yeah, and
with a
I
couple of
remember I
buds
listened
here.
to your yeah, I listened to that live stream
There was
that you
quite
did
a
on
bit of
that.
vitriol in the comments from a couple of some people were on the same page. They're like, I don't love it, but I'm not going to let it ruin my day. But there was some vitriol, and
Hmm.
I don't know. I think normal people ignore stuff like that. I don't think it's healthy to engage in that and turn it into a never ending. Like I think to some loved ones that are no longer here, and I'm very happy that I spent every moment that I could with those loved ones. I would
Hmm.
be very, very disappointed in myself if I thought back, I could have spent an extra hour with that loved one who is no longer here. If I had just not engaged in that internet drama with that person, and
Hmm.
I don't have those regrets because I just block, 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 block.
Yeah.
And there was like quite a bit of vitriol. Like, how dare you guys look at the silver
Hmm.
line? And that's exactly what some of the vitriol and the anger and the threats. Can't believe that people make threats about this stuff, but it was like, how
Hmm.
dare you look at the bright side of this thing that has gotten me so angry? I just think it's not normal to be that enraged by entertainment.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I've gotten similar comments on my YouTube channel too.
Yeah.
I've been called everything. I don't care. I got a really thick skin, but uh, I thought it was kind of like I was more in the middle when it came to the He-Man adaptation. Like I thought the music was fantastic, the animation was like out of this world. But the one thing I did kind of notice, and I think when they did the flashbacks and they showed He-Man and Tila going on adventures together and how
Mhm.
they kind of had that
Yeah.
chemistry together, I think that's the series people wanted, was what they were showing in those flashbacks.
Yep. That's what we were sold. This is a continuation of the Filmation show. And I was like, yes, yeah, right. But yeah, I hope so. But it won't be. Like, I had these conflicting feelings like, oh, it's going to be. I just remember thinking, like, there was, it might be hard for people to believe this, but when they announced Kevin Smith, there was rejoicing. Yes, Kevin
Hmm.
Smith. And I was one of the people going, hey, I'm usually like, hopeful, but I'm like, Kevin Smith? What qualifies him to be the
Yeah.
perfect choice to continue Lou Scheimer's He-Man? Like, Kevin Smith is
Hmm.
not the right call here. So I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, I was more middle of the road. But one thing though I find with I found it with this He-Man, and I found it with the 2000X He-Man cartoon. And me and a buddy of mine talked about this. It's for some reason, and this is when it comes to He-Man's transformation from Prince Adam to He-Man. No one can capture like
Yeah.
the power of the original Filmation. Like even to this day, when I'll watch like that cartoon and when it builds up and he pulls that sword, and it still gives me goosebumps
It's
when I
overwhelming.
watch the.
From a technical standpoint, one of the things that helps with it, I mean, they throw so much work at that scene, just from a technical standpoint, like the cells they use and the lightning, and they just for the time there's no computers, they just
Mhm,
threw so much work at it. And then the Brave Star series that they did a few years after that, you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff and they just threw so much work at it, so much more than anyone else was doing, and you can see it. But the transformation scene is just so overwhelming. It's like they just kept throwing more and more and more at it.
mhm,
But one of the things I really like about that is they turn the volume down on He-Man, on John Irwin, when he's saying I have the power. Like, the instinct would be to really crank that up and blow your eardrums
mhm,
out, but instead it doesn't sound as loud as you would think it is, and then they give it an echo, so it's like he's being drowned out in the power of Grayskull.
mhm.
It's all about conveying the power of Grayskull. It's not necessarily just He-Man. Look at He-Man, he's so awesome. You can't really see him. He's being lost in the light. There's lightning
Yeah.
and it's bright and it's flashing. It's like, where is he? You could see him, yeah, but it's like it's not how most people I think would have animated. And case in point, how he's being animated in the other incarnations. It's just like he's getting lost in there, and the audio is getting lost in there a little bit, or it's a little quieter than you would think it would be.
Mhm.
It's just handled so perfectly because it's not the typical convey power type of way
Yeah.
of doing it. So I never really thought about it, but yeah, the transformation scene in the Mike Young productions, it's great, but it's not the Filmation. And the same goes for, one of the highlights of the new He-Man Revelation show was the transformation, but still, like they just don't do it like Filmation did it.
Yeah, and the only other time it kind of came close was, and this there is no transformation sequence in obviously in the live action film, but there's one scene I've actually watched quite a few times over because just the way the music cues up and everything kind of gives me chills. Is when He-Man is trying to get to his sword and Skeletor is blasting him away, and then the music builds up. And when he grabs the handle, you can hear
Yeah,
like a blast of energy, and he rips it out, and he says, "I have the power." And then that whole
same
scene, like I
deal.
love that scene.
I
It's
think
I
they
thought they
turn
did a good job.
if I'm remembering it right, I think they turn the audio on Dolph down a little bit. If I'm remembering
Mhm.
it right, he might not be as loud as like most of the other dialogue in the movie is, especially for a shout.
Yeah.
Like if an actor is shouting, it's loud. But I think they took that step back, and if I'm remembering right, they gave him an echo too, maybe. But kind of the same approach that Lou Scheimer took. Like, let's lose him in the
Mhm.
light. Let's lose his voice in the
Yeah. But yeah, you
the
could really like it. You could really feel it. Like it was. They do such a good job, and they've never been able to duplicate that in the newer cartoons,
yeah.
in my opinion, anyway. And talking about transformation sequence, another transformation sequence that now it's been done technically, like special effects wise, better, but it's never been done executed artistically better, or it's never had the same impact. And that is Bruce Banner's transformation into the Hulk in the
Oof.
MCU movies compared to the television series. Because in the television series, they treated it when they didn't think of it as an afterthought. They treated that like that was an event that they were building up to in that episode when he turns, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't have the same impact in the newer films.
Yeah. That transformation gets me every single time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so simple too. Like, it's just
Yeah, it is
one
so
note
simple.
with
Yeah,
the voices in behind, and you just know, like, you guys are in so much trouble. You
I
messed
know.
with the wrong melon farmer here.
And like one of my favorite, and this is probably one of my favorite Incredible Hulk episodes um, is the one where he has to face the guy who's abusing his son and wife,
Mm.
and David Banner's like pounding on the door, and then the guy opens the door and he just, hey David, get lost, and he shoves him over the railing and he lands in the garden. Then he has his like head buried, and he you think, oh, he's going to change, but then he doesn't. Then he's running across the road and everyone's slamming doors on him, and he's pounding on one door and he's crying for help. Oh, there's a husband and wife getting, there's a child and his mother getting beat next door. Someone help me, someone help. And then he pauses and he turns around. His eyes are all like that whitish green. And then, it's
I gotta find that
fantastic.
episode. That sounds awesome.
That's a
Do
good
you know
episode. Yeah.
which season was that?
I think it's season 1, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah,
I love
that's a
when
good one.
I love when he transforms when scumbags are beating on him and it's instant
Mhm.
karma. You know, the karma tornado travels through. But the ones that deviate from that, where it's stress, because they do say anxiety can cause it. They usually just go the route of pain, and sometimes it's really, really like it contrived, and like they put him in a full Nelson and they punch him in the stomach. And sometimes like Bixby was fantastic. He's an incredible
Yeah, he
actor,
he really sold it. Yeah.
but that doesn't mean sometimes he doesn't ham it up too. And
Mhm.
so sometimes, like when he's got the full Nelson and they punch him in the stomach, he overdoes it. Like he really goes overboard with the "I'm in pain" and then the eyes and stuff. I'm like, okay, this is still going to be fun. But I love the
Mhm.
ones where it's anxiety that causes the transformation, like when he's landing the plane. Do you remember that one?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's landing the plane and it's like, "Oh my god, I don't know how to fly a plane. I don't know how to land it." And he starts transforming while he's
Yeah.
landing the plane. Not he
Yeah.
didn't stub his toe because sometimes they just even it's like they forgot that anxiety can cause it. And so he's getting angry and he's getting really angry and then he stubs his toe or not stubs his toe, but like I do remember him like hitting his arm on something or just something totally obligatory. Like, why'd you
Mhm.
go to the thing of something smashed his arm or his leg? But sitting in that, I'm glad that they didn't go the route of something fell on him, while he's landing the plane. But it's just he's stressed out and he's turning into the Hulk and he's fighting the
Mhm.
transformation. Like that's what makes
Yeah.
that one so unique. He's like in mid transformation. Gotta do this. Gotta. It's one of the few times he's actually able to somewhat control or delay the transformation. And then once the
Mhm.
plane is down and everyone's safe, he just lets it go. It's time to just I like
Yeah.
that he didn't reverse the transformation, like he's okay, he's Banner again. Whew, that was a close one. They show that it is not something that he can control for very long. And if he can control it, it's only for a few seconds. And it takes everything that he
Mhm.
can muster in order to just delay this inevitable hurricane of destruction.
Yeah. And what made me think about that, the difference in how his transformation is handled in the MCU as compared to the old TV show, is I had watched a YouTube video, and it was two guys were talking about how the flying sequences for Superman were handled in the original Superman film compared to the new movies. And how, even though how Superman flies in the new movies is, from a special effects standpoint, is superior to the old films, but the artistic choices of how Superman flies and how he seems to enjoy it and everything, it's that part of it is superior than anything they've done now.
Yeah. Yeah. Christopher Reeve,
Hmm.
the master, my Superman.
And
Uh,
yeah, and like, just bringing it back to the Hulk too, like that's another, I guess, adaptation from, well, a comic book to live action. And usually I don't like it when they radically change things, but I actually prefer the television origin to the comic book origin.
yeah, same here. I've seen I've read the comic origin of the Hulk. I also remember the cartoon version, and I'm like, just the smaller, Banner doing experiment on himself and it going awry. I always
Hmm.
preferred that. I like the Hulk being Jekyll and Hyde rather than a giant or this insanely huge Hulk that can jump a building and can pick up two tanks and smash them together. Like the Hulk in the Avengers is just way too super powered for me. And as big a Hulk fan as I am, when I hear people
Yeah.
who really know the Hulk comic talk about the things he can jump to the moon and stuff, I tune out. I'm like, no, my Hulk is 7 feet tall. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
my Hulk is 7 feet tall and 300 pounds. Like, I don't need an elephant sized Hulk. I just prefer just a little bit bigger, a little bit greener, a little bit more
Mhm.
muscular than Bill Bixby.
Yeah, yeah, they do go and sometimes in the comics, they go pretty over the top with what
I
he can
do
do,
love the
and
transformation in the first Avengers movie, though, where they're
Mhm.
telling him, "Well, we could use the green guy. It's time to get angry." And Ruffalo, it's the best. He smiles. He looks back and he goes, "That's my secret. I'm always angry."
Yeah.
While he's
Yeah.
smiling, and I do think his transformations are too fast in the movie, just because
Yeah.
that's where we're at in this day and age in movies.
Mhm.
There's no time to do the drawn out Bill Bixby into Lou Ferrigno
Yeah,
transformation, which is so good, and it's a shame
it
because
is, yeah.
it's good because it's drawn out. And today they go, no, we can't have it drawn out. It takes too much time. That's why we are where we're at, and why people behave the way they behave, and their patience level is where it is, just because
Mhm.
everything people have been conditioned for decades now: quicker, faster, instant,
Yeah.
no time. You learn it from everything. You don't just learn it
Mhm.
from your everyday interactions with people. You learn it from your entertainment,
Yeah.
especially your TV shows and your movies. And when everything in TV shows and movies is faster, more intense, like George Lucas used to say.
Yeah. And, yeah, yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed this as comparing the 2 origins of the Hulk between the television series and the comic book. The one thing that kinda struck me in the comic book, he's helping the military make a weapon of mass destruction. But then
Yeah,
that kind of goes against what his personality is. Like it doesn't like it's almost like a paradox. So it doesn't make sense.
it's
Like
like
when you
Oppenheimer.
follow the character afterwards, like the way his morals and everything is set up, like he sacrifices himself to save Rick Jones. Why would this guy be doing that in the first place? Like really, he wouldn't be doing that. We're in the television series. He's trying to find answers of why he couldn't save his wife,
Right.
and his motivation makes way more sense.
Love.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that makes it just right there. It makes a better origin story.
Absolutely. He's haunted by, why couldn't I save her? And why could this mother save her son? And this mother save her son? And, did I not love my wife enough? What, how could a woman lift a car and I couldn't? And then he
Hmm.
actually finds the answer. Like, it was the gamma exposure. They all
Yeah.
had more gamma exposure that day. And it's still a miracle. It's still
Hmm.
like, how could this possibly happen? But sometimes miracles can have scientific explanations, and he found a scientific explanation to a miracle.
Yeah.
And so it
Yeah.
just kind of gave him you know, or he was on the road to a little more peace of mind. But then the experiment and just a lack of patience, and cursed
Hmm.
himself. So
Yeah.
it's a fascinating concept. I agree. I think it's a superior origin story in that it's more emotionally motivated
Yeah.
than the military aspect of the
Yeah. And yeah, because that part never really like made sense. Like when I reread it, I'm thinking, well, why would he even do that? Even in the MCU, his motivations don't really make sense. I guess they're because that one they're trying to recreate like the super soldier serum, I guess. So and it
yeah,
was an accident gone awry, but yeah, I think that was the best version is that television version, even though
yeah.
it's radically different from the comic book.
I agree. Right down to changing the first name of the character. But I
Hmm.
appreciate that. He thinks it's a curse, but it's actually one of the best things that ever happened to him. But he can never know it.
No.
It's like he can never see him, because there's no one had a cell phone with a camera back then. But
Hmm.
he just comes out of it thinking, "What have I done now?"
Yeah.
The Hulk has already killed a person, which isn't really what happened. I,
Hmm.
well, it was McGee mucked
Yeah.
with that
McGee.
situation, but he just goes
Yeah.
around thinking, he's better off dead, and he's not quite invincible. I never
Hmm.
felt like the Hulk in the show was invincible. That's another issue I have with the comic and the movie Hulk. He's invincible. Bullets bounce off him. Like, no, in
Hmm.
the Bixby show, the Hulk gets shot. A bullet penetrates the Hulk, and or maybe it's Banner, but he bleeds. So that's why
Hmm.
I like the Hulk just being really strong, but not a superhuman. He's
Yeah.
not a superhero. He's
Hmm.
a mutation, a slight mutation. So
Yeah.
I love that show.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an amazing show. Yeah. And the video you did about Bill Bixby, and that was one, like, I've watched that one a few times. That was a good video
Yeah,
you did.
man. Good
Yeah.
man. Good man. And talk about going through the meat grinder. Yeah, that's
Hmm.
a lot of his performance has the depth and the pain because of what he went through in real life. And it's like
Yeah.
they
With the,
tell actors to, find your pain place and delve into that. And like, oh my God, don't, Bill, don't. It's anything to do with the loss of a child is like guard your heart. Like when we kicked it off, the Bible says guard your heart. And so I don't know, maybe that was therapeutic for him, but wouldn't, wish that on anyone.
hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic actor, and I wish that show got a lot more attention and love than it
Yeah.
does, because
Yeah.
everyone who
And
remembers it seems to have been really touched by it. It wasn't just entertaining, but it was like a really good soulful show.
yeah. And while the other thing about that show is, when you go back and watch it and compare it to other shows that are around the same time, the writing is like way at a way higher level.
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't age like other shows. Like, I can remember, because when I was a kid, I watched Dukes of Hazzard, A Team, those shows. And then, well, it was different back then, because when a show was done, that was it, was done. Like, you couldn't see it no more. And so when A Team was over, it was gone. When Dukes of Hazzard went over, it was gone. Like, I couldn't go out and buy it on DVD, nothing like that. But
oh,
years and years later, when I was in my early 20s, my older brother had that Deja Vu channel, and all those shows were on there. So I had a very different idea of what the A Team and Dukes of Hazzard was in my mind. And I would watch, Dukes of Hazzard, A Team. And I remember thinking, well, this is not quite as good as I remember it. Like, it was a lot more corny, a lot more cheesy. But they would also show the Hulk after those.
mm,
And when I watch, like, compared to like those shows, um, the writing has aged so much better. Like, it's to me, it has so much more rewatchability
yeah,
than a lot of the shows that were on around that same time. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Or
yeah. It touched on universal themes.
hmm.
It wasn't really. I mean, obviously they wanted to make a profit, but some shows were uh what did Brandon Tartikoff call it? Some are hamburger shows and some are filet mignon shows.
Hmm.
So I think the Hulk should have been a hamburger show, but everyone involved with it said no. We're doing like a serious, great dramatic show, and the Hulk pilot is right up there with the Superman first movie,
Yeah,
the
it's a
Richard
very
Donner
good pilot. Yeah.
Superman. And some
Hmm.
people I say that to, they go, "Really? Crappy 70s show, really?" I'm like, it's a masterpiece. I mean, that pilot episode is a movie in and of itself. If you never
Hmm.
watch any Hulk after that, just watching that initial movie, that's the best Hulk movie ever made. And it's doesn't exactly have stiff competition, but
Hmm.
there's no better Hulk movie than the pilot for the Incredible
Yeah,
Hulk TV show.
it is a good. Yeah, it was really solid. Like, and not to say that I don't like A Team or anything like that. Like, I do have the whole series on DVD, and every now and then I'll just for that cartoon escapism, I'll watch an
Yeah.
episode. Um, but
Yeah, I love the A Team, but I can't watch 20 episodes back to back. Like
yeah.
I watch one or two and I'm good for a while and I'll always come
Hmm.
back to it because it's so much fun. But it's like Silverhawks. I can't watch 30 episodes of Silverhawks. I can watch
Yeah.
two. I can watch
Yeah.
you know, I don't know. I can watch two episodes of Mask and come back to it after a while. Some stuff just is more style over substance, and then
Hmm.
some stuff is substance over style. Now I can watch a lot of Brave Star before I get sick of it because it's just got so much heart and soul. Um,
That's a show I've not seen in a really long time. Braveheart or Brave
Brave,
Star.
Brave Star, yeah, fantastic
Yeah.
show. Yeah. We're gonna have to talk about it some other time. This is feeling like a Joe Rogan podcast. We went real deep
Yeah.
dive here. It's been really cool.
Yeah. Oh, it has been. It's been awesome. Yeah.
I hear my husky feet pitter pattering around, and I think it's time for my wife and I to give him his evening walk. But thanks a lot for
Yeah.
making time to chat tonight.
Yeah. Then thanks for having me on. That was
And
really awesome.
big thanks for being part of the Patreon tribe for a couple of years now. Really appreciate you supporting the channel.
Yeah, well, it's worthwhile channel supporting. So,
and so for the folks listening to this, if you would like to hear some more from Dangerous Dominic, check out Film and Page. It's at youtube.com/@filmandpage1138. I wonder where that number comes from. What you're working on, if you care to spoil what you're working on.
Well, right now I'm working on a video because I'm kind of going a little bit more scripted. So I'm working on a video now of why you should read The Expanse. Series of sci-fi books, because I
Amazon show.
Yeah, I just finished the last book of the 9-book series. So.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I watched a little bit of that just solely because Thomas Jane is in it. I think Thomas Jane's fantastic. So I didn't realize that was based on a book series.
Yeah, it's because I started reading the books probably about 10 years ago, and then was super stoked when they made the show. And it is quite a bit more on the darker side when it comes to science fiction, but as far as books go, very solid read.
How did the show do with adapting the books?
The show, they actually did a pretty good job. The only thing they did is they kind of compressed some characters. So characters do things in the show that multiple characters do in the book.
For time constraints, obviously.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't realize that was based on books. I didn't really stick with the show very long, but now that I know it's a book series, I might check it out if I ever get the time. There's so many things I want to do. But I don't know. My wife loves to read, so I'll recommend that to her as well. All right. Well, again, thanks a lot for chatting.
All right.
And thanks to everyone for listening along. I hope you enjoyed this. And until next time, sure to stay.